Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the 21st meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewak, and Attawandaron. We respect and honor the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. I want to also add that the City of London is committed to making every effort to providing alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact sppc@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. With that, colleagues, I'll look for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none. Consent items. We have one item under the consent. This is the third report of the governance working group. I'll just see if the chair has anything to add, or you can make a motion for that item.
Well, thank you, Chair, and through you, yes, if folks have taken a look at the report from the Governance Working Committee or Governance Working Group, I just want to highlight that there are a number of items that were put on our working agenda at the start for which we received verbal updates from the clerk, and no real movement is happening on those items right now because they are impacted by the province's introduction of strong mayor powers. And there is still some work being done by Clerks Across Ontario to interpret how those impact some of the items that are on our governance working group agenda. So we received verbal updates from that, and they will continue to be on our agenda for future consideration. There were a couple of minor changes made to be a little bit more permissive in the advertising under the council expense policy. And there's an in-camera item which we will deal with later in our agenda tonight.
Okay, so you're willing to move the committee's report. Because it's a working group, I need a seconder. Councillor Cuddy. Okay, discussion on the items from the working group before us. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open that for voting.
And through you, Chair, yay, because I entered my old password and didn't get into eScribe on my first try, so I have to restart.
I will vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Okay, we have no scheduled items. We have a number of items for direction. We'll deal with them independently of each other. I just want to say on 4.1, which is the August progress update for health and homelessness whole of community response, there is the report, and then there are two pieces of correspondence. It seems to me like it makes sense to deal with the report first, and then I can deal with the pieces of correspondence second, because they can basically be decided independent of each other. So there's no sense in trying to confuse them into one giant mega motion. So what we'll do is we'll proceed with the regular items and the consideration of the staff recommendations in the staff report first. We won't deal with the correspondence items until after we've dealt with those, and then we can deal with the items and possible motions from the correspondence from the deputy mayor and the councillor, and of course receive the other items related to that at that time. So no one objects to that process. I think that'll allow us to focus discussion and not add a bunch of things together that we could deal with separately. So with that, I will start with what is the staff report, which my understanding does not have any sort of presentation to it, but you're available to answer any questions or updates on that report. And of course, there's a series of recommendations from our staff. So if at some time a colleague is ready to put those on the floor, you don't want to just ask questions, I would suggest you put that on the floor before debate. But if you have a couple questions on the report, we could do that now. Deputy Mayor Lewis, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it is a question for our staff at this time. We have two different extensions of single source contracting. One in Clause B, ARC-Aid Mission Services. One in Clause C with Canadian Mental Health Association. Both appear to be similar in nature, but the ARC-Aid sole source contracting is almost double what the CMHC Coffee House program is. So I'm wondering if our staff can comment on why we have such a drastic price difference between one drop-in program and the other.
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. The difference in the funding is the hours of service. So it's a greater hours of service in terms of the support and the types of services being provided through ARC-Aid versus the extension of services through the CMHA Coffee House. I am joined by Mr. Cooper on the Zoom, and I would ask him to also elaborate.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you and good evening through Your Worship. Mr. Dickens landed that answer quite accurately. It is really the focus of the duration of services as well as the addition of some of the meal provision. CMHA does offer some food, but it's not a prepared meal like the ARC typically provides to individuals as part of their service delivery.
Go ahead.
And one other follow-up question specifically on cost estimates in the staff recommendations. Clause D, which is an amendment to the existing agreement with London Cares. There is under D2, a water total estimate cost of $5,000. I'm just wondering if staff can comment. Is this purely single-use disposable water bottles, and have other options been looked at for reusable? It was mentioned in the report, the amount of waste and garbage collection, site cleanup that is happening. But if we're contributing to the site cleanup by having a whole bunch of disposable single-use plastic water bottles around, I'd like to know if other options are being looked at.
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, yes, these are single-use disposable water bottles. The teams did look at sourcing reusable water bottles and some logistics in terms of how that would roll out. One of the foremost challenges is the lack of running water near these encampments and in these depot areas. So that was a bit of a logistical challenge to have refillable stations or to bring mobile stations on site, given they're also quite busy throughout the summer months. So this is reflective of the use of water bottles.
Any other questions? And again, someone could put a motion on the floor at any time. Councillor Trosau.
Yes, I have a question, and I've raised this with Mr. Dickens. I wanted to ask about the ARC-Aid funding. Now, this goes through September 30th, and it just seems to me that we're going to have to come back to the council table to just do this again. And I'm wondering if we couldn't extend this period a little bit and give them a bit more, so we can just take care of that. And as I read this, I suppose we could say the same thing about D. But what came to my mind was the ARC-Aid service. So I'd like to have an amendment increasing this, but I wanted to get your feedback on that.
Mr. Dickens.
Oh, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, the original intent of the temporary service depots was to run on a 30, 60, or 90-day iterative process. And that is why some of the downfall of that is that these contracts are not set for any long periods of time, really looking at the upset limit being the 90 days. And the intent was all along to evaluate, as we reported to council, that if things were not working, we would make some changes. And so there was an understanding at the table where this work is being designed and where the depots and the strategies are being fleshed out, is that we would be taking things on a 30, 60, 90-day cycle. So that is why you see the short-term funding. It is certainly, it could be a barrier, certainly for some service organizations, but that is why it is depicted the way it is. If there were to be an extension in the funding or the duration of that service, we would want to align it with that 90-day period, or certainly we would want it to align with the standing up of the hubs or any extreme weather response that might be put in place.
Would it be a difficulty to amend this, either to increase the amount and increase the time, or just sort of for this amount of money, to give the staff the ability to extend this for another 3 months, to take us into the winter response program, just to avoid another trip to council? I'm just thinking about our agenda, and or is this not a concern?
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm going to go to Mr. Cooper on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, and through your worship, the funding for the ARC and for the food extensions is not a significant amount. If you're to look to extend it for another 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you'd be looking at maximum another $130,000 to the ARC, and probably another $40,000 or $50,000 for food. So that can be accommodated under our existing budgets. So there would not need to be a funding shortfall anywhere else. So we could accommodate an additional time frame if needed.
And is there a certain period that could be accommodated without another budget issue? I'm just looking for text for an amendment to say something along the lines of, and it further noted that staff may extend this for a period of X at the same rate.
Mr. Dickens, do you want to start?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think for simplicity's sakes, if we were looking at extending this, we would look to just simply increase it, and that would take us into December. So if we were looking to double the funding, and that would double the duration.
So I would like to put forward an amendment. Well, it's not on the table, so can I move it and make an amendment at the same time? Or is it
Well, you could move it, put it on the floor.
Okay,
and then you can
I'd
make
like
an
to move it with a slight amendment.
Okay,
to-
let's do the move it first. Let me get a seconder. So,
But you're going to let me talk a second time.
for sure.
Okay, I'm worried
It's
about
committee.
that. Okay.
It's committee. You're good at committee. I'm not going to
Okay.
be at council.
All
Yeah.
right. I don't wanna
Council would
give
be a
up the
different
floor.
story, but okay. So, Councilor Trosa is willing to put the staff report as written in the staff communication on the floor. Is there a seconder for the staff report? Oh, Councilor Frank. Okay, so the recommendations from staff are on the floor. Councilor Trosa, you'd like to make an amendment to the staff recommendations?
Which would simply change 130 to 260, and it would change through September 30th to what day, Mr. Dickens?
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would recommend December 1st.
December 1st. And that's my amendment.
Okay, is there a seconder for that amendment? Councilor Ferreira? Okay, so the amendment is to change Part B to move the date from September 30th to December 1st and adjust the amount from 130 to 260, correct? Okay. All right, that's moved and seconded. So I'm going to keep the debate tight to the amendment now. I know people probably have lots to say about the main report, but let's have a debate about the amendment. I have Councilor Pribble first.
Thank you, Sir, Chair, to the staff. I do agree certainly with my colleague, Councilor Trosa, to have it extended, but a little bit disappointed in terms of December 1st and the winter, whatever we call it, the initiative for winter, to my last notes, was supposed to start middle of November. And if we are going to extend it to December 1st, then there's going to be unnecessary 2 weeks of extension, and I'm hoping that the winter response is going to be stronger and we are going to have enough beds that the encampment will not be needed. So I just want to verification if we are still heading towards middle of November, and I will have a follow-up question after. Thank you.
Mr. Dickens.
Through you, Your Worship, I don't have a concrete date on when any type of cold weather would start. That table, the encampment implementation table, is actually still working on that planning, and they are set to return back to our strategy and accountability table August 30th with an update on their plans on that work so that it can come to SPPC in September, which would then outline the timing and outline the plans at that point. Providing daytime space and providing meals, if it were to extend to December 1st, I don't think would be an unnecessary overlap. I think that's still meeting a significant need in our community. And just to caution committee, we have a number of individuals in our community that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. The standing up of the first 3 to 5 hubs, the creation of a cold weather response will absolutely have a significant impact in the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in encampments, but it is not necessarily going to eradicate or eliminate all encampments. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, through the chair to the staff. And I'm very happy, I got to tell you, I'm very happy with the encampment strategy what we started. And from my personal experience between the Salvation Army, between the agencies volunteering, it's working really well and it's really very beneficial. So I'm really very supportive of it, and I'm glad we have this program till the bigger picture is in place. I just don't want to know that I really honestly, again, middle of November we were supposed to start with, and I hope we will, because even by that, the cold weather the cold weather might be very harsh and we need some response. If we put this till December, I don't want to have staff and the strategic table to think, okay, we don't have to, because we are right now on time. In terms of the RFPs, in terms of the social agencies, we are on time. And because of this additional 2 weeks, I don't want them to start thinking, okay, we don't have to have it in place by beginning of December. So that's really only my concern I have, to do it till 1st of December, because I want to make sure that we do have the winter initiative in place by middle of November. And if you can please give me a feedback about this, if you feel there is no concern, and then I'm okay with it. But if you feel there's a concern, that I want us to send a message that we do want this by latest middle of November, the winter response to be in place.
Through you, Your Worship, what I'll suggest is that with any of our service contracts, should a service no longer be required, or should there be a different program coming online, and one service were to wind down, in this case, the Arcade services that we're procuring, if they were to wind down in middle of November in replace of something else, then we would adjust the funding actuals to match that. So if the community were to stand up a cold weather response in middle of November, and for some reason these services were no longer needed, or they were shifting to something else, then that funding would be held back, and we would, again, as we always do, fund based on the actuals. So if for some reason it needs to have a hard stop when the cold weather starts, we would be able to manage that.
Okay, last comment. I just want to be clear for our staff and also the strategic advisory tables that if we do approve this till 1st of December, that we are not really sending a message that we are okay for the winter initiative to start 1st of December, that we are certainly hoping and expecting that the winter initiative is going to start before that time.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Pribble. I have Deputy Mayor Lewis on the amendment.
Yeah, I'll be brief, Your Worship. I'm not going to be supporting the amendment. I'm not comfortable with starting to add funding to sole sourced and contract amendments on the fly on committee floor. Whether organizations have been consulted about this or not, I'm not aware, but if Mr. Dickens needs to come back for more money in the future, he needs to come back for more money in the future. there's a reason I am comfortable with short-term durations on these things. I want to see community feedback, as we have in this report, some initial feedback on the Encampment Depot service. That needs to continue, just as it is continuing community engagement in our whole of community response on the hubs next month. That needs to continue. So I'm not prepared to start extending contract times and start adding money just on the floor without any real discussion or thought put into it with the agencies or with the tables that are involved in directing the whole of community response.
Any other speakers on the amendment? Oh, Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. Through your chair to staff. Can you tell me how much we've spent with Arcade on this particular service this year?
Through you, your worship, I'll go to Mr. Cooper on that one, please.
Thank you, and through you, your worship, I don't have that number off my fingertips. I'm gonna need a few minutes to look that up, but a ballpark number without reviewing it is since April, we're probably looking at about under $200,000, maybe $250,000.
Okay, thank you. I didn't come here today prepared to extend that contract over and above that was in the staff report. I echo the Deputy Mayor's comments. Before I'm prepared to go further, I want a chance to speak with staff to find out the services provided for 7 hours a day at that cost, and see what other service providers are available and where we are with the hubs, because we're kind of in a fluid motion right now. I've heard that remark many times. It's fluid. We're moving different directions as we go down. So I don't think this is the proper time to set specific parameters in this particular case, because we're not doing it in the other cases. So I will not be supporting this amendment.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the mover for bringing this forward. I think we've heard from staff that there is a significant need in the community. And I don't see how by extending the financial support to December 1st is going to create a problem in our community. Yes, it'd be nice to get the numbers, maybe on a monthly basis. I think that's something that each and every one of us can follow up with. But if there is a need in our community by providing daytime support, in particular the meals, and we can do funding adjustments if needed, I would be very supportive of supporting increasing the money to $260,000. I do have a question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. What would the reporting look like when it comes back to us on council with the spending of these funds?
Mr. Dickens.
Through you, your chair, through you, your worship, we typically have our organizations report their financials on a scheduled basis, so quarterly reporting, and then an annual summary report of the finances. In terms of program outputs and outcomes, there are certain things that are tracked on a monthly basis, so number of beds filled, meals provided, people served, things like that. So that is data and information we can collect. It's outputs. It shows you the type of service that was being provided for that period of time. But the financial reconciliation happens more on a quarterly basis. So if committee is looking for really granular data and as part of the meal service delivery in the daytime resting space, we could collect some of that on a monthly basis. It will tell you how many people were in and out, how many meals provided, things like that. But the financial piece would come on a more scheduled basis.
And do we know through the chair when that financial piece will be provided to us?
I will go to Mr. Cooper on the financial reporting schedule for the winter for the depots.
Thank you, and through your worship, we're still, we've just received the April to June actuals from our organizations at the end of July, and so we're in the midst of reviewing those items. For the winter response, we're looking to bring a final kind of wrap-up report early in 2024. For the depots, we would, if things go to the end of September, we would look to bring a report on the first 90 days, which was July to the end of September, back probably in October, early November. It really depends on the work the community is doing around the community engagement and the assessment of the work that's been done. I know they've engaged a number of third-party evaluators to do some of that work, so we're kind of stuck to their timing.
So I understand that a report will be coming back to us then at the end of September with the from ARC-Aid. And so the October to November will be reported after December. I just want to make sure I've got that right.
Thank you, and through your worship, I'll take that question. So the first quarter of the reports for the depots was June to July, June to end of September. So that's the first 90 days. And so obviously we would look to get the actuals of the dollars that have been spent for that. Our teams do need a little bit of time for collating the financials, as well then as receiving the feedback from community. That's part of that whole conversation. It is more than just the financials. I appreciate those financials are very important, but feedback from our community, as well as understanding the numbers of folks that receive meals, receive water, receive services, is just as important as the financials. And so that does take a little bit of time to collate. So for the first quarter of the depots, which is that was July 1st to the end of September, we could look to bring a report probably back in early November to either to this committee or to CAPS. I think we've been working through this committee, so we could go to the November SPPC for that report.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we would be getting and receiving those reports. I also appreciate the fact it's just not the financials, it's also the work that's being done on the ground too, that is really important. I am going to be supporting this. I don't see any reason why we would not do that. There is money. We're not looking at a large extension, and it is going to be adjustable as well according to, I hear the concerns from another colleague about the winter response and having that tied up, but there's really nothing to prevent that, depending on what day that is rolled out. For me, there's no reason why we would not support the increase.
Other speakers? You used 2 minutes and 40 seconds the first time, so if you want to keep going, you can, but I'm going to keep timing, so go ahead. Councilor Pribble.
So comment to my colleagues, I will not be supporting it either, and I really don't want to send a message now. And I really think that there's a really good chance that we might extend it in September and maybe go to end of October, but I really don't think, I think this was a temporary measure. And as I said, it's really working. It really is. And I can say it from my personal experience, so I think it's a great benefit, but we introduced it as a temporary measure. I don't want to send a signal to neither the people that are working on the bigger picture, as well as our community, that we are accepting this and we are moving on with this limited measures. I'm not against it. I think there's a good chance we'll extend it. But at this point, when we heard just from the staff that the next, the table is meeting end of August, I want them to have on mind that we have done this only till end of September. So I will not be supporting this, and I hope you join me. And there's a good chance that in September we'll do it. But let's get to it in September. Thank you.
Okay, next I have Councilor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mayor. I support the motion that's on the floor now. I do not support this amendment. It's completely unnecessary. We have an extension that's before us currently on the floor. If another extension is required in the future, then it's incumbent to come back to council. I think that makes only good sense. And for that reason, I will not be supporting this proposed amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Rahman, go ahead.
Thank you, and I'll keep it short. But I won't be supporting the amendment. And the reason I won't be supporting it is because of something that I've heard from some organizations, such as Arcade, in the past, and that is sometimes, you know, when they've applied for funding and they've had extra, they then provide that funding back to either ourselves or to, in some cases, London Cares. And then when they need it again, they come back and they say, we need some funding, and they're told, well, you just received funding. So I would rather that the organization come to us with the prescribed amount that they need when they need it, so that we provide it in the way that it is needed best, that they can use it, and that it's allocated and we know what that allocation is for. So I won't be supporting this amendment at this time. Support the good work that they're doing, but not right now.
Okay, other speakers to this? I'll speak, and I'll just do it briefly from the chair. I'm not going to support, wait, I better time myself. I'm not going to support the amendment, not because I don't think the organization is doing good work, and I support the current extension, but given we have an SPPC in September 19th, and it can be approved by council September 26th, there's adequate time, if warranted, that through Mr. Dickens and his team, that can come back with a further extension for these services that could align with more information we have about any sort of cold winter or cold weather response that we need to have, and those things can line up perfectly. So, you know, I appreciate what the councilor's trying to do. I recognize the good work that's being done. I think the staff report is very good. I don't think we need to do something further without actually consultation directly with the agencies who would be providing the service, who are doing so based on a contract. Let's be honest, they're providing a service that's difficult to do. They may not want their contract extended. I don't know. That has to be part of the discussion with those proponents, rather than just extend their contract and their terms and their pay without direct consultation with them. So I appreciate the notion, but I won't be supporting it for those reasons. I don't have anyone else on the speakers list. So this is on the amendment, which is just Councillor Trosau's amendment to change the end date to December 1st and change the cost to $260,000. So I'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion fails, 3 to 10.
Okay, so back to the main motion, which is was moved and seconded duly. That's the staff report that you see before us with their original numbers all the way through. I'll continue to take a speaker's list on the main motion now. Councillor Pribble, go ahead.
Just on the main motion, through the chair, through the mayor, to the staff, when we consider this year's winter initiative, I would like our staff, together with, again, the strategic table, to really honestly consider the numbers, the budgets, the financials, what our staff did for last 3 years. Thank you for that. Great. That was very well done. But one thing is, I would like us to consider to do it, to do a consideration that the contracts will be done directly from the city with the social agencies. And I think it would alleviate a lot of questions that we had during the past month. And I think things would make it much more easier. And I believe we would be, I always say the saying, more in charge of our destiny. So I hope this will be considered, that we do the directly contracts with the social agencies, our organizations. Thank you. If there's any feedback or comment from staff, please go ahead.
No, they don't have anything to add. Other speakers? Okay, so what we have before us on the floor is the staff recommendation all the way through, moved and seconded. So we'll open that full set of recommendations for voting now.
Closing the vote, motion passes 13-0.
Okay, and as I discussed before, now I want to deal with the pieces of correspondence related to the subject. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis. You have a letter that you've written with Councillor Pelosa. I'll let you present that and make the motion, and then I'll just confirm that Councillor Pelosa is willing to second.
Yeah, certainly, through you, Chair. The letter's been circulated. Colleagues have had an opportunity to read it even before it made the added agenda. I do believe that I have a seconder in Councillor Pelosa. I am prepared to put the motion as circulated on the floor.
Councillor Pelosa, good to second? Okay. And Councillor Frank, you want to speak? Okay, I'll get you on just one sec. Let me just write something down. Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Councillor Frank, go ahead.
Thank you, yes. And I appreciate the advance notice that the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Pelosa circulated the letter in. And I appreciate the sentiment overall that the both councillors are making with the letter. I personally had a couple issues with it, and I was able to hash it out over the weekend with Deputy Mayor Lewis and discuss some alternatives, specifically with Part B, and therefore have worked on some new language. I think that better reflects some of the issues that I'm finding when we have these discussions overall. So I think, yes, it's been pulled up. The change would be to Part B, so further work with those partners to undertake the processes to stop this practice, including the development of proper levels of funding by senior levels of government for adequate homelessness and supportive housing services, and appropriate consequences for organizations or individuals found to be engaging in such activities. So Part B has been amended. So I suppose I'd need a seconder for that amendment, and then I could maybe make some comments.
Okay, sure. So your motion is to amend Part B to, as you said it. You have that language? Okay. So is there a seconder for that? Councillor Pelosa?
I'm not sure if it makes any difference procedurally if we saw it as a friendly amendment. No, it doesn't. Okay, sorry, I tried. Seconder.
Yeah.
Happy.
So let's just deal with it as amendment, because although they may agree, not everybody might. So we'll see how it goes. So you'll second it? Okay. So that's moved and seconded. So we have an amendment on the floor now. We're going to get that up on the screen if you haven't already. You have already? Perfect. So colleagues can just review that. So it's a change to B. So we'll keep the debate tight to the amendment just on B. You might have opinions on the other parts of the motion. You can deal with that when we're back to the main motion. So on the change to B, I'll look for speakers. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I want to thank the mover on the amendment for making this happen. I did have a concern with B. I think in particular as it related to the enforcement. I really do appreciate the fact that we are looking at all levels of government for adequate homelessness and supportive housing. The supportive part is really important, and that appropriate consequences for organizations or individuals found to be engaging in these activities. I think it brings it back to the needs that we need to have here and the support that's needed in the community. Really pleased with the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Frank, you want to speak to the amendment, and I'll look for other speakers. Deputy Mayor Lewis, you'll be next. Go ahead, Councillor Frank.
Thank you, yes. And I appreciate again, both the mover and the seconder of the original motion for accepting the friendly amendment. I think that we heard a lot, and I don't know if people are the same, but during the campaign last year, I did hear the discussion and the narrative that people are sending busloads of people who are unhoused to London, and I think that narrative is out there in the community and people are discussing it. I don't think it's entirely accurate. I do think that in the original letter, there was citation that 319 people in the first part of the year were diverted back to their maybe original cities or towns. So there is obviously some indication that some of this is happening, some of it perhaps against their will. We don't really have a great data set, I would say, and we kind of are just scratching the surface with those original numbers. So I would be interested in finding out more about that. I'd be interested in finding out, if we could do a survey, and I'm not going to put any of this on the floor right now, maybe it's a longer term discussion, but figuring out how people became homeless in London. I personally think, and I have a suspicion, but this is my own rumor mill starting, that a lot of it is because people are getting evicted and they're not able to pay rent, and because they're on ODSP or OW, or they're on minimum wage and they're not able to make their rental costs. And I would love to see more of our advocacy go towards those efforts. But that being said, I don't have the data point to even back that up. So long-term, I would like us to further understand those, because I think narratives do shape a lot of decisions and how people are treating each other in our community. And I think that those need to be developed in collaboration with our agencies that we have locally, with the Hub on Homelessness programming and agencies. So long-term, I'd like to see more collaboration with that sector. But given the information that has been pulled and cited in the letter, obviously there is a small amount of this happening in the community, and I don't think that long-term it's the best use of our time to be trying to spend a lot of our efforts diverting people back to their homes. I do think if people are originally coming to London for services, medical services, shelter services, we do have a duty and responsibility to support people in our community. But that is why I was more comfortable attributing some of the responsibility to federal and provincial levels of government to take on supportive housing and healthcare. So all to say, appreciate the sentiments, and hoping to see Part B maybe make some of those compromises and see other people interested in that. Thanks.
Okay, so that changed. Your Part B is on the floor for discussion, so I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis next.
Well, I hate to jump on the thanking bandwagon, but I do want to thank Councillor Frank as well for the great conversation we've had over this. I will also share that I've had some very good conversations over the last week with Middlesex County Warden Kathy Burkhart-Jeffson, with Strathroy Caradoc Mayor Colin Grantham, because part of the narrative out there, and I'm glad that Councillor Frank said what she said, because it gives me an opportunity to make a statement too in follow-up to that. The idea that there are busloads of people arriving in London and being dropped off in front of the old Greyhound station or in front of City Hall or wherever, that is a myth. People are not arriving here on a Greyhound coach or even a yellow school bus and 50 people are getting off the bus looking for homeless services or shelter services. They are, however, coming by the twos, by the threes, and when this letter was first circulated, there was an opportunity for me to speak with a member of the local media who's actually in chambers tonight, and it took less than an hour for him to go down the street to the Men's Mission and identify 2 individuals who said yes, they were provided assistance to come to London from Toronto. So the narrative is not false that people are coming here. The narrative that it's entire busloads of 50 people arriving at once, that's false. But there are those challenges. And when I referenced Warden Burkhart-Jeffson and Mayor Grantham, when we are talking about diversions or people from arriving from out of London, those communities are part of our catchment area. So I don't actually consider them diversions in the same way that I would consider a diversion to a Toronto or a Windsor or wherever. Because those communities, and I should say also I had a good conversation with the former Deputy Mayor of Thames Centre, Kelly Elliott, as well. Those communities actually, in some cases, have 0 services. It's not that their services are over capacity like ours are. It's that there is not a service in the first place. So of course, as a regional hub, we are going to be receiving people from those smaller communities. And that's why it is so important, and I really do thank Councillor Frank for for the points that she made as we were discussing back and forth. The role of the senior levels of government in providing adequate funding so that people can be met with where they are, no matter what size community that they are in. So that there are services available in Strathroy, so that somebody does not have to come to London, so that there are services available in Thorndale, so that somebody doesn't have to come to London. Because the best thing, I think, and I hope we would all agree, is that people don't have to be relocated or disconnected from their networks of support to seek help in a time of need. We should, if the province is truly a compassionate place to call home, be helping them where they are. And so adding that component of advocating through, and I want to emphasize to everyone that, you know, this starts with advocacy efforts through the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, because this is an issue that all cities have to come together on. So really appreciate the great conversation with Councillor Frank to bring this amendment forward. Happy to change that clause in B and support it here and as part of the main motion later.
Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd also like to echo the thanks in terms of the change of language in B. It was also one section where I felt some work needed to be done, so I appreciate the work Councillor Frank and Deputy Mayor Lewis did on this, because I do think that this more accurately reflects what the original intention was. And further to the conversation we're having, I just want to say, I think originally the language worried me because it felt a bit like a witch hunt. And I think one of the things that we've grappled with all of our discussion in terms of health and homelessness is, especially with our frontline agencies, we're trying to rebuild trust. And I understand that there is, you know, the rumor mill in terms of which agencies do what, but I don't want to place blame where it's unfounded. And I think that was my issue, because there's a lot of good work being done by these agencies, and I don't want collateral damage happening in terms of groups that are acting appropriately and being lumped in with folks that might be doing something that we have issues with. And I do think directing in terms of the senior levels of government, the role they have to play, as Councillor Frank indicated, there's a lot of reasons in terms of how folks become homeless, and we need to bring those issues up with our provincial and federal partners when the opportunity arises. So I thank them for the amendment, and I look forward to discussion on the main motion as well. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers on the amendment? Otherwise, my speakers list is exhausted just on the amendment. I don't see any other speakers, so we're going to vote just on Councillor Frank's, seconded by Councillor Pelosa's amendment. So we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 13-0.
Okay, and now I need a mover and a seconder, and I'll go back to the originals for the as amended motion. Deputy Mayor Lewis and Councillor Pelosa are still willing to second this as amended motion. And so now that the motion is as amended, I will look to speakers on the new motion that's before us. Oh, Deputy Mayor Lewis, Councillor Hopkins, were you looking to get on the list too? Okay, I'll do you next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I want to take this opportunity because this is also tied to 4.1, the whole community of system response. And I want to really, really strongly emphasize how much I support where we're going with the whole of community response. I know there are lots of questions and concerns out there still, and we do not have all the answers yet, and we will have to make adjustments along the way. But I actually feel hopeful that this system, the hubs, the supportive housing, really has the potential to reimagine the system and do things in a different way than they've been done before, and do things in a successful way. We will help people stabilize and perhaps see their acuity level drop from high to medium or low in the hubs and be ready to move on to stable housing. We've included a component in there of going after the province for a rehabilitation center so that those who can't stabilize will have the opportunity to access rehabilitation services in our community too. There's a lot of good things laid out in this plan. And I want to start by saying that right off the top. Yeah, we will make some adjustments along the way. But for the first time in a while on this file, I've actually got some hope that we've got something that is going to start making a difference. And this time next year, I think once we've got the first 5 hubs stood up, that we will see and feel a difference in our community. But the reason I brought this forward is because our whole community system response cannot fix the problem of homelessness and housing insecurity across the entire province of Ontario. And it is one of the issues that I have heard from people in the community that this is going to be successful and we're going to see an even greater influx of people who are coming to London for services because they can't get them in their own community. And we need, through AMO, through our partner cities, and in conversations with the province and the federal government as well, we need all communities to own this problem, not just London. We need to help people where they are. And if people want to take our model as a template and start looking at how they can implement it in their community too, great. Happy to do that. Happy to share information with them. I'm sure Mr. Dickens would be delighted to give information to service providers in other communities about the path we are heading down. But we have a tremendous backlog of need in our own community. Our system right now, our current system, not the new system, but the one that is trying to survive for the moment, is broken. It is over capacity. It is not working. It needs a reimagining. That's what we've undertaken. But we can't do that imagining for all of Ontario. And as I said in my comment on the amendment, when I talk about supporting and helping those who are in need in London, that includes our catchment area, that includes those in our neighboring outlying communities, because we are the regional hub. But as I also said in my earlier comment, and I referenced Mr. Newcomb and his report last week about the individuals he was able to quickly get comment from at the Men's Mission, we cannot absorb those who are on the streets in Toronto. We cannot absorb those who are being assisted to get here because there are not services elsewhere, because it's inhumane. It is false pretense because there are not services here either. We know how long our housing access waitlist is. We've heard the numbers around the whole community system response about how many people this program, and we've admitted that even if everything works perfectly with the hubs and the supportive housing this year, it's not going to help everybody. There's still going to be lots of work to do in the coming years. So this is important because we have to say to other communities, you have to own this problem in your community too. You cannot look to us to solve the problems in an Ottawa or a Toronto or a Windsor or a Sarnia or any community. And I'm not naming those communities to shame them because I've deliberately stayed away from the name and shame of where people are coming from with assistance, but it is happening. And it doesn't even matter what the number is at the end of the day. And there's been a lot of attention paid to the numbers, but I think the fact that we were able through staff to get
30 seconds.
To get some data that said more than a quarter of the individuals that they've spoken to through the diversion process identified that they are not in London by their own choice. That has to be a concern. And so that's the intent of this motion, to start that advocacy with AMO, with the province, find partners, work together, and let's present a united front to get an Ontario solution to this, perhaps based on the London hubs model.
And your time's up. Thank you. I have, now Councillor Van Meerbergen, I saw a hand go up and then a hand go down. I'm not sure if that was a false start or whether you wanted to be on the list. You're looking to speak? Okay, you're up now then. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Some may remember I brought this up, this issue, a little less than a year ago at a council meeting in the form of an inquiry, because as some of us have heard, perhaps many of us, with good sources, very good sources about this problem, And up until now, it was really not quantifiable. I recall at the time, the answer from staff was basically they just didn't have a handle on what the numbers were. I'm very grateful. I think we all should be to the deputy mayor and also Councillor Pelosa for bringing this motion forward. At least now it's starting to come more into focus, at least with some numbers, and obviously over time that should get a little more accurate. But the fact of the matter is, property tax at the municipal level was never designed to be spending on this area of social spending. That was never the primary reason for the municipal property tax. This is clearly a function of the other levels of government, and they have to step up to ensure a uniformity, particularly across the province of Ontario. It simply can't happen that we have a migration, however it's formed, into another municipality. It's unfair to those local municipal property tax payers. It's unfair to the individuals involved. And so I think this is a really good step with this motion coming forward. And again, thanks to Sean Lewis and also Councillor Pelosa for bringing this forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I have myself next on the list, so I'm actually going to turn the chair over for this one to Councillor Rahman. Okay, go ahead. And
Thank you. I acknowledge I have the
get a timer ready. So
yeah, great. Thank you. I acknowledge I have the chair and Mayor Morgan on the list. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, colleagues. So I will support this amended motion, and I'm thankful for the work on the amendment. And I want to say a couple of things. I know Councillor Hopkins for many years has been our AMO rep, but I recently have had the privilege of being a rep on the Ontario Big City Mayors. And during that time, I have become the vice chair of that group and the lead in conjunction with Mayor Patterson on the 29 largest municipalities in Ontario's strategy on health and homelessness. In fact, we have a very important delegation as OBCM with the health minister and deputy premier and a number of other ministers specifically on this subject. Mayor Patterson and I will be presenting as part of the AMO conference on Wednesday. All this to say, this particular issue is not something that is new to mayors across the province. It is something that I've spoken to with other colleagues and talked about because when we think about those who are suffering, when we think about those who are unsheltered or those who are homeless, if you have compassion for people here, you have to have compassion for people across the province. And we really need to provide services in the places where people are. And that is why, although we do incredible work here on our health and homelessness file, and there is much interest in others in replicating our work or taking similar paths with tweaks that represent the uniqueness of their municipalities, we all recognize that we need to advocate together for services across this province in all the places that are facing this challenge, because people should not have to go elsewhere to receive service when they are unsheltered or when they need wraparound service supports. And so that is our position as a group. And on this particular issue of people moving, the types of things that we have discussed, not as a group, but me individually with members of that group, are how do we take like a compassionate approach to people who may need to go to another city? And you almost have to think of it as like a case-based approach, because this is a healthcare issue, right? When you have mental health and addiction issues, there's certainly people who don't have any of those issues and are just simply unsheltered, and it's an affordability issue. But if you think about the person who says, I live in Guelph and my brother lives in London, and so I want to get there. Very reasonable for him to want to get there. If we take a case-based approach, we could find a way to have someone in that city connect with, say, Mr. Dickens or his team and say, can you find his brother? Can we make sure there are some supports there for him? Can we make sure that we can connect him with what he thinks is there in the city? For sure we can. Let's get him here. We get him with his brother. He's got some supports. But if he can't, then someone maybe comes here and the shelters are full and there are no supports, and now this individual is just homeless in our streets. So a compassionate approach would say, how do we treat this in a way where when people need to find another location, because people can move freely across this province, how can we do that in a supportive way? Now, when people are told that there are services somewhere and there's not, or they say there's capacity or a good thing there, and they show up there and shelters are full and they're simply homeless in another city now, disconnected with many people, it's a very incompassionate way to approach this. So I could tell you the mayors are united in a compassionate approach. We want to try to find solutions not just to the problem, but to ensure that there are opportunities for people to have those services in each and every city across this province that faces this challenge, and that will continue to be our approach. So I welcome this motion. It supports continuation and a focusing of the conversations that I'm already having, and I know it will be well received by a number of my mayoral colleagues, particularly on OBCM. Not to say that there's certainly a larger conversation at AMO as well about this, because it would need to include many of the smaller municipalities and rural municipalities as well. But I certainly, on behalf of my work at OBCM, you know, this is something that I certainly welcome the support to continue the advocacy and the discussions on. So thank you.
Returning the chair to you.
Councillor Hopkins, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the Deputy Mayor for bringing this to us as a conversation. And I do appreciate the Mayor's comments around the work that he's doing at OBCM. I do want to follow up with the Deputy Mayor's comments about the importance of supporting the whole of community response. I heard that loud and clear, and I really do appreciate your advocacy on homelessness that you're doing and the support there. And I don't want this conversation to be sidetracked from the important work that is going on with the whole of community. Reading up on the motion, I want to thank staff for the work that they've done diverting 319 individuals this year back to their natural places. One of the things I learned at the AMO conference, it wasn't a conference, it was a symposium last May. One of my big takeaways from that symposium was that a lot of municipalities, towns are experiencing homelessness, but the challenges in rural communities are great. And there needs to be more support there. And I quite agree with Councillor Van Meerbergen when it comes to other governments like the provincial and federal government stepping in and to support municipalities. I do have a question around as an AMO board member, and it relates to undertaking immediate advocacy efforts to develop a united policy and reaching out to OBCM, but AMO, and as we all know, there's 444 municipalities that represent AMO, and there is a process. And I would like to know from the mover and from the seconder as well, just what are those expectations and how you see moving forward as it relates not only to OBCM and to the province, but also to AMO, how that advocacy is going to look like.
So I'm going to say there's this not cross debate. It's a question that will help you inform your support for the motion. So I'll let the mover address the question about how you see the work at AMO working. I think I've articulated the piece probably on OBCM, but go ahead, Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, yes, without engaging in cross debate on this, I would say that I think the Mayor has actually outlined quite well what I would see as the start of the advocacy, which is as delegates, as OBCM, as the board and others gather here next week, let's start by acknowledging that this problem is occurring, that there are a number of different reasons behind it, and let's start having the conversation about how those systems can start to work. And I think the Mayor's example of connecting, a community, say Guelph, making sure that they are connecting with Mr. Dickens' team here before somebody is automatically provided transportation to London, not knowing whether or not the brother can be connected to or not. I think that sort of collaborative, how do we manage our systems in a way that we are ensuring we are not creating problems, by taking information just at the intake point. So I think that that was a really good example. I'm certainly happy to have a more in-depth conversation with you on this, Councillor Hopkins, but I think that that really encapsulates really well an example of what I have in mind with advocacy is acknowledge we have a problem, and then let's start talking about how do we, as different communities with different resources, start to work together to ensure that we're just not shuffling people around, that we are actually connecting them where services and supports are available.
And Councillor Pelosi, you have something to add as the seconder?
Yeah, thank you. For me, my interest in this was really making sure that people found home. Where is home? Like, is it going to be in London? Do they want to stay? Were they put here and they had no place to be here? They have no connection. They're alone. They have no sense of community. And working across all levels of government and already hearing what Mayor Morgan had said about the other big city problems of making sure that we can connect with like-minded services of saying, you know, I have these people looking to come back. Is there a safety place for them to land, for they don't come to London, just end up on our streets, or we don't, you know, that the brother or the family member that's here would accept them and be able to help, that they know what they're getting into, they have those supports, realizing for some it's easy and for some it's been a really long time and a really long journey, that finding the compassion, the humanity, and giving back hope to those who have sometimes lost it.
Councillor Hopkins, those were answers to your question. I'll go back to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, and I wasn't intending to get into a debate at all, but as an AMO board member, I wanted to understand, and just following up with that, through the chair to whoever, would the first process with AMO start with a letter from the mayor's office, or I just to the AMO board? Because it specifically states the immediate advocacy efforts with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and I just wanted to
Let me
have a
take
bit
that
of
one
sense.
because it says the mayor and the government relations be directed to. So we wouldn't just go out on a whim and start writing letters. You as an AMO rep, I think this is something that we would certainly chat about what the most effective way to engage that organization is. I certainly would know what an effective way to engage Ontario Big City Mayors is. So I think that this is not something that you need to decide in this moment, but we can have a conversation to see what that looks like in a way that is effective and also recognizes the existing work that AMO might be already doing. So I hope that makes sense, but that's generally how our advocacy would work from my perspective.
Really appreciate that, and also acknowledging the advocacy that AMO is doing with homelessness, and looking forward to hearing other comments from my colleagues.
Okay, next I have Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, I'm just wondering if staff might be able to give us some other examples of where someone would be brought here against, someone that is unhoused would be brought here against their will, where there's a medical context to it, where it might involve the hospital system.
Mr. Dickens, I can start with you and let me know if you are going somewhere else, okay?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'll certainly do that. So yes, as a regional center for a number of services, individuals may be brought to London for treatment, for services, that type of thing. And there may not be a direct facilitation back to home community. Sometimes this happens in the judicial system more often than the healthcare system, where individuals are released to London without some type of mode of reconnecting to the communities in which they came from originally. We are certainly not immune, like many communities across southwestern Ontario, to see secondary migration from asylum seekers, be that they're coming to London to seek medical supports or the services in which they were hoping to receive and where in the place in which they landed are not available, and they move throughout the province. With the healthcare community in particular, we have taken a lot of steps to work closely with the hospitals in terms of the discharge planning. Now, it does happen that people do not have a home to be discharged to, or people leave against medical advice. That is more prevalent in terms of people going into the healthcare system and then leaving with nowhere to leave to. I can't quantify the number of people that come into hospital from other communities, or if they come into hospital against their will. If they're in the field of, or if they're receiving medical treatment, I don't know how we would be able to establish that they're receiving medical treatment against their will, for example. So, sorry, I can't quantify that for the councillor.
Thank you. Just to follow up, if someone was discharged from a hospital here, brought here as part of a regional strategy to provide treatment here for some ailment that they had, and their condition required that they needed to come back and see a specialist or receive treatment in, let's say, a dialysis center, and that treatment required them to be in the city limits, in the city to receive that treatment, let's say, once a week, but they are unhoused, where would they go?
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, Your Worship. That would fall typically outside of our municipal purview as a service manager. And I wouldn't be able to adequately comment on the steps that the social workers at the hospital would take or the medical professionals in terms of whether that person is staying in a nearby hotel so that they can readily access their treatment services, if it's in some other type of healthcare program where they're partnered somewhere. If it were to be engaged with us at the municipal level, we would certainly be working with all of the service partners to find an option for that person to have some type of temporary accommodation so they could receive their treatment. But outside of that, that would probably be a planned treatment program or some type of structured healthcare plan in which probably the social workers through the healthcare system would be working with that individual to make sure they're actually getting to their appointment. So that's either travel to and from or temporary accommodations. If that individual is in receipt of the Ontario Disability Support Program, so they're on social assistance, ODSP has financial measures in place that allow for medical transportation. That medical transportation is not just limited to a taxi or a bus. It will also accommodate train travel if that person has to travel a great distance to get to that treatment. So there are measures through social assistance that can assist that individual to come and go and receive temporary lodging while they undergo treatment.
Thank you, I appreciate that. To follow up, I give that example, previous work that I've been involved with years ago with the Canadian Cancer Society, where people were seeking treatment here in London for cancer, and there was not service for them to get back and forth between their home communities. They were told to find accommodations in London, and for some that was quite a hardship. So I mean, I understand the purpose of this. I think that there is advocacy that can be undertaken, but I do not think that we may understand the fullness of this issue, whether it be because of the lack of data that we have available on this topic, but also because of just the complexities with this issue. So I understand where the mover and seconder were coming from with this, but I do see the points made in the letter provided by Lifespin leadership, because I do think that we have a responsibility when it comes to the language that stigmatizes people. And I worry that if we're not contemplating all the scenarios by which someone may have come into the city, it shouldn't prevent the way, or it shouldn't impact or stigmatize the help that they're receiving. So I'm just mindful of that. Generally supportive of looking at this from a provincial strategy in terms of how we address relocation of anyone against their will. But when it comes to Part C, where we're talking about hospital and judicial, I think is better, or justice versus detention centers, perhaps I do think that there are so many other complexities as to which those social workers in hospitals and those in the justice system are considering that perhaps are not fully and need to be added into this conversation in more depth. I wonder if the strategy and accountability table have weighed in on this at all as well, if that's possible to ask if they've weighed in.
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, the strategy and accountability table have not, just based on timing and the sequencing of meetings. This was not something that was on the last strategy and accountability agenda. We'll note, though, that you know, our teams here at the city receive about 1,600 calls a month of people looking for help. And still, other people present at shelter or present in community, or they're engaged with, we come upon them in encampments and things like that. And they, not all 1,600 are calling, asking for help from outside of our city limits. And some will, and some folks that we have presenting at shelters for the first time are from within the city, and some are not. In terms of the sentiment of this, I think what we take as civic administration is that it's a concerted effort to work across service manager catchment areas, that we're being deliberate about the fact that we're all stretched in terms of our resources, and that we become deliberate in terms of our efforts to properly connect people to services. As we do now when individuals present in London and we may be a stopover, and they are, you know, seeking a connection back to a different community, that we're helping facilitate that transaction. And so from a civic administration perspective, this aligns with our practices, and I think it's a good signal to service managers across the province to also reciprocate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that context.
Okay, next I have Councillor Ferreira. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I'm hearing the points that my colleagues are saying. The data is a big one for me too. The way I see it is like, this is a very significant direction that we're putting on the floor here. And the preamble to the letter does indicate that the data is incomplete. And I feel like just for a decision like this, because I see it as very significant, we do need data-driven decision-making in this situation. And I would like to see us being able to figure out a way to get more concrete, solid data for this type of direction. Because, you know, I've been around for like over 3 decades, but 2 decades ago was the first time that I heard about the rumor of individuals getting bussed in. And I've been hearing it for a while, but it's definitely increased in the last little while. But I've also been speaking to individuals in other municipalities, like people in Chatham have told me that there's a rumor that we, Londoners, are busing people into Chatham. Hamilton has the same rumor going around, not from London, but people are getting bussed in. And you hear that from municipalities around. It's a very complex issue. And the catchment area comments too. We do have services that other municipalities and townships around don't have. So we're within the catchment area, we do bring people in. The issue is complex and we just need more data. And that's my main concern, which is why for A anyways, I won't be supporting A. I like the amendments that came to the floor. I had an at-length conversation with the deputy mayor on this, so he knows what I'm saying. He knows where I'm coming from. But my main concern is it's the data. I would like to see more data for a direction like this. I've heard the rumors myself, but I've never seen anything concrete. So those would be my comments on that. For Part C, I did like Part C. I am hearing what Councillor Rahman is saying towards Part C. So I'm still mulling that part over. But, you know, in the end, we do need data for such a significant direction. We need more. I would like to hopefully in the future come back and maybe figure out a way to compile a better data set for this type of direction. So those would be my comments.
Councillor Trosau, go ahead.
I guess my first question is procedural, and that is when we vote on this, are we voting for the preamble or is it just the A, B, and C? Because a lot of my problem is what's in the preamble, and I'd be more comfortable supporting parts of this if the preamble were stricken explicitly.
Yes, so there is absolutely no part of the preamble that is ever approved by council. We don't do whereas statements and then it being noted. So the only thing that we approve is the motions before us in eScribe, and so it's just the ABC pieces as you see on your screen. Often councillors will write letters with background or their own thoughts or perspectives, and I'll say in the past voted for things and say, I disagree with the preamble, but I support the notion because I support it for different reasons. So all that to say, no, we do not approve or endorse preambles for letters.
I'm going to weigh in with my opinion a little bit. I don't think this was a good way to raise this. I would have preferred to have seen this come through one of the tables to us, or better yet, through staff, a staff report. I believe that the parts of the preamble, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here, but I think parts of the preamble were inflammatory. And I think that's the last thing we need right now. And I'm really glad that Councilor Frank came in with her amendment, because I can certainly support Part B. And I have a lot of confidence that AMO and the Council of Big City Mayors is working on what they should be working on. And I don't really think I need to support Part A. And I'm not sure about Part C. That didn't bother me, although what my colleague here has just said is worth it. I think it's premature to pass this as a matter of council. I think it's already been indicated that this is not going to be turned around in the form of a letter at the upcoming conference this week. And I would rather see a broader approach that's based on data and a staff report on what are some of the causes. We're going to try to decrease homelessness, but what are some of the causes of the increase in homelessness? And it might be that migration is a big one, but I think what Councilor Frank said before, that's my theory too, that perhaps one of our biggest problems in terms of increasing the ranks of homelessness here in London is people are precariously housed. Their costs are going up. Their benefits are not going up. The cost of food is going up and the cost of rent is going out, and they're one rent payment away from being homeless. And that might be a bigger problem. And I want more data before I make a decision on this. Now, in terms of the diversion of 319 individuals back to communities, it's interesting that in the previous paragraph, well, I'm not going to debate what was in this previous paragraph because it's not on the floor, but I would like to ask staff that the version of 319 individuals, do we know what type of, were there false pretenses? And if there were false pretenses, what were the false pretenses? And if there were false pretenses, who was making those false pretenses? Can somebody enlighten me with that? Because it's here, and whether we withdraw the preamble or not, I think the damage has been done because this was certainly widely circulating and widely discussed. So can I ask, through the chair, can I ask staff that?
Yes, I'll go to Mr. Dickens on that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just a point of clarity, the 319 individuals that were diverted are stats that we track in terms of diversion away from shelter. So some of those individuals are, majority of those individuals are from London. So they're individuals who are looking to present to shelter, about to experience homelessness. And our teams work to actively divert them away from experiencing shelter stay or experience homelessness. There is, some rough estimates. Those numbers are not scientific. It's not that they're unreliable, it's that they're unscientific. Because individuals will disclose what they feel like they can and are safe to disclose. So yes, there are individuals who will present to London that are not from London. Maybe they were told that there would be services here for them. Maybe they thought there would be better services here for them. Those are really difficult to quantify. We can provide some rough estimates, and we've done that in certain cases, and certainly there are some percentages and figures that are used in this letter as well. But the 319 individuals are the number of diversions away from experiencing unsheltered homelessness or homelessness in shelter. Not all 319 individuals were diverted away from London or back to other communities. They were diverted away from experiencing homelessness.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm not hearing any evidence of false pretenses. And I know that that's been taken out of Part B with a much better and humane amendment, but the sting is still there. The sting is still there. Now, I want to point to the Lifespin letter, because I think the Lifespin letter raises some very, very good points. And I think that we should understand the fundamental issue that Lifespin is making, or the fundamental issues. And one is there's an insufficient evidentiary basis, given the limitations of data collection in low-income communities, to make some of the assertions that are made here.
30 seconds, Councilor.
Okay, I just want to indicate that I'm not going to be supporting this motion. I will say, I think that the discussion today has been much more reasonable than what I've heard before, and I think we're going in a good direction. But I don't think we need to be passing a council motion right now. I'd prefer to get more information from the staff. I know it would be out of order to ask for this to be diverted, referred, whatever the word is. But I think we should vote this down, with the exception of perhaps allowing B to be drafted in a standalone way. And I really hope that we try to be careful about how we use words, especially when we're talking to the press.
Okay, your time's up. Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Hopkins, go ahead. You have some time left for sure.
Am I allowed to speak the second time? I just want to follow up on Councillor Trusseau's question around opportunities to get a staff report and further data. Are there opportunities?
I can't answer that. There's nothing in the motion for that, but I can ask Mr. Dickens. I think he mentioned it is a difficult thing to track some data, but I'll go back to Mr. Dickens. I don't think anyone else can answer that.
Through you, Your Worship, if committee were to direct staff to report back with data, we would pull together some data through our homeless individuals and families identification system, HIFIS. It would be incomplete, and to the Councillor Ferreri's previous comments as well, that the data is incomplete in the sense that, again, we're collecting what people are able to disclose and what they disclose. And so what they disclose to frontline workers versus somebody else might be completely different. What they disclose to media, what they disclose to shelter workers, again, might be completely different. So we could certainly comb through the data we do collect. We could bring that back as a bit of an overview, but it will not be complete in terms of telling you perhaps what it is you want to know. And what we want to know as service managers. That is the tricky thing about collecting this type of data on this type of population. So certainly look to council's direction on this, and if we're directed to report back, we could bring back some type of picture for you.
Thanks, Councillor. Other speakers to this? Councillor Ferreira, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, going to Councillor Hopkins' point on the data, like I understand the data is coming from the HIFIS system and that data is self-reported, but is there any way we could get the data and have maybe like a level of confidence of accuracy of the data with that, with what we get from HIFIS? Is there a level of confidence that we could assign to each data point that would help us in that regard?
Mr. Dickens.
Through you, Your Worship, less confidence as this conversation goes on. I will go to Mr. Cooper on this in terms of what data is collected now. And certainly there may be people, and just for clarification, there will be cases, as always, in every community where individuals are arriving in London under false pretenses, under the belief that there's a shelter bed for them, or that there's housing options for them, or that there's services here for them. Those are hard to quantify, and it's also, we can collect some of it. So for example, an individual shows up at shelter and they're not in our system. The intake worker will ask, where did you spend the night last night? So very plain language interviews. And they may say, I spent the night last night in another community. And what brought you here is that I was told there would be shelter beds here. And so who sent you here? And that's maybe where the conversation starts, right? As it starts to get a little deeper into that investigative nature, sometimes the information dries up on us. So I will go to Mr. Cooper in terms of what that data is currently collected and what type of report might be produced.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. When we complete an intake with an individual, whether it's our coordinated access team or a shelter or an outreach worker, the real key is getting consent initially, right? So that is where we can then share and collect the data and share it across our system of those agencies who are using HIFIS, as well then limit their access based on their job description. So a lot of client details that we generally get are somebody's name, somebody's birthday, their sexual orientation. We get kind of where we do ask where they stayed last night. So why they're accessing emergency shelter or need to access emergency shelter. A lot of those kind of specific client details. So again, with the self-reporting of a lot of this data, where somebody stayed last night it could be answered in multiple different ways depending on who the person's speaking to. So for that kind of data, as Mr. Dickens indicated earlier, my confidence in its accuracy is waning, but our teams could comb through some of this work and we could look to, like I say, bring a report back on some of that information. I know when we run our by name list, we get information around somebody's veteran status, somebody's Indigenous status. We look at any kind of medical information that they disclose. We don't store medical details in HIFIS, but if they identify they have a mental health challenge or a substance use item or any other kind of medical piece that they have, we add that. We also ask about their income status, as well as if they're on Ontario Works or on ODSP or old age pension or they're employed. So we do ask a number of those sort of client detail questions, but not sure that information is exactly what committee is looking for as part of this conversation.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you. Thanks for the information. It's just as we search for more data, I'm just thinking, like, should we be adding maybe an amendment? I don't want to keep on adding too many amendments, but just for the more data, the data points themselves, maybe specifically, if the HIFIS system does track individuals who have been self-reported to say that they don't originate from London, and maybe compare that with the number of individuals who say that they came here against their will, and to give us like a percentage there, and maybe assign a level of confidence to that data point. Just anything that just to help us navigate through this, because like I said previously, it is a very significant direction. So I would really like to have a little more evidence based on this type of direction.
Sorry, what are you asking, Councillor?
I do want to add maybe, I don't want to get it too convoluted, but maybe it would be wise to add an amendment to just request for that data to be compiled and to assign those levels of confidence. So I will move that.
Okay. So we're gonna need to get some language here, because all we have is the motion be amended by adding a new following Part D. Part D is that you'd like staff to make their best effort to give us the data, knowing that it will be incomplete. And I don't think you can, I'm not sure if you want to say establish a confidence level, because there's not, like, we know that the data will be incomplete, but so you just want staff to come forward with the best possible data they can compile and some context about the strengths and weaknesses of that data, essentially.
Essentially, and the reason I keep on pointing out the confidence level is because the case that was brought up before with an individual coming here, I forget the exact details of it, but there was obviously, I'm pretty sure Mr. Dickens spoke to how it's self-reported and how we may not necessarily know any realities or anything that's being withheld and what's being disclosed. So if the reason I think a confidence level would be important is so we can get, without reading the entire file in the HIFIS system, getting a level.
Yes.
I'm looking to hear the motion, not the reasoning for the motion.
Yeah, that's right. I need to get
I was
a
just
second.
trying to answer the question.
I think we're good on getting language, and Councillor, sorry, it was my fault by not listening, because we're trying to craft the motion, and Mr. Dickens is listening too, to try to make this work. I think we have something now. I know that there's a councillor willing to second it, so this is going to be something on the floor. So maybe just give me a second to get the language hammered down. And this is what happens when we make motions on the fly. It's going to just take us a minute for the language, so just be patient. I want to get this down. Then we know what we're talking about, and we can be a little clearer. Councillor Pelosa? Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to read something, Mr. Dickens, I want you to listen because we want to make sure that this works with what you're saying too. So that civic administration be directed to provide the appropriate, to provide to the appropriate standing committee the data that is available with respect to this matter, so basically the context of the motion, including the reliability of the information, which is the general broad-basing term we're trying to get for your confidence, strength, weaknesses of the data. So that's good for you, Counselor?
Yes, through you, that looks good to me.
Mr. Dickens, does that kind of capture the opportunity to give some context on the data? Yeah, okay. All right, so that's then moved and seconded. One sec. Because this is an amendment to the current motion. So it's moved and seconded now. So you can speak, Councillor Ferreira, and then I'm starting a new list because this is an amendment. So I have Councillor Pelosi next. So I know Councillor Frank, you were on the original list, but if you want to get on the amended list, you just have to let me know. Okay, well, we'll come back to you when we get back to that list. So Councillor Ferreira, go ahead, and Councillor Pelosi, you'll be next.
Thank you, through you. This would be brief. My points that I said, I do like that, so I hope that we can get approval for that. And the next one was just if, I don't know if I can speak to this on at this level, but I just wanted to break down the vote for the main motion once it comes.
Sorry, say that again?
Once we get to the main motion, just to break down A, B, C, and if this one passes,
Oh,
D.
yeah, sure. When we get to the whole thing, we'll figure out how people want to divide it. No problem. Okay, Councillor Pelosi, go ahead on the amendment.
Thank you. As much as I really get excited by data and glad that we finally had some data coming of the things that we already knew were happening in our community, but having the data to actually back up, we could start and just scratching the surface of seeing what the problem is. My concerns with this request is, what are we going to do with the data? How much time is it going to take to get the data? Is the data going to be really of any more value than what we have now? The staff time it could take to get the data that they could have been doing other work that they were directed by council to do. And to the points already made by staff, and having heard them from our service partners in the community already, some people's concern in the community about the HIFA system and being tracked in it, who has access to the data, how much data is it, does it ever get to the point that there could be breaches or that they're getting to the details of being identifiable in it. My question on this, or maybe just a comment, would be, we're looking to see more data, realizing the community tables that have come together, of looking to see what data, conversing with them, of what data they find partners coming forward looking for service are most apt to share, what wording it would be to get the answers that we're hoping for, being the honest answers. If I ask you, are you from London? Yeah. Do you mean I've been here for a month? I was born here, been here for a year. Do I want to be in London? That's a different question. I do, absolutely, I do. London's great. But what do we want from this data set that we're getting? What is the questions that we're really trying to answer with it? Are we driving the data to see how much we need for family housing, Indigenous issues? Is it mental health, addiction support? Like, what are we trying to do with it as we collect it? And what is our partners going to be able to use this data and put it into action for, as they would have more connection with the data than us just looking at it for whatever purposes we might feel like. So I'm not sure, through you, maybe to Mr. Dickens, if that conversation has already been had at some of the tables, or if that's like we said before, some people want things to come up through the tables to us versus top down.
Mr. Dickens.
Through you, your worship, in our monthly update report that was before you this evening, we talk about the establishment of a system foundations table, and that table is looking at data sovereignty, data collection, data reliability, but also establishing evaluation and measurement frameworks for the hubs and housing and really the whole of community system response. Not part of that contemplation at this point, and that table has started in August since we submitted the report to you. That table has stood up and has met, and we're really looking at how data is collected, what data is collected, and how it informs decisions. I would note that our best ability is to report back on what's already in the system and not to undertake a new evaluation, investigative surveying process. That we would not be in a position to start going out and asking new questions about your history and that sort of thing. So we collect last address as it's reported to us, as it's known. But we would not be collecting, at this point, some of the information that you're looking for. So again, we could report back on what's in the system. It would give you a high-level overview, but again, to the counselor's question, and it would be a clarifying ask on my part, as for my team, is what is the intent of this data or the purpose of this data? That would actually help us be a little more informed about what it is we're looking for. What do you hope to do with it?
Councillor Ferreira moved the motion. What is the intent of the data? Mr. Dickens just helps with a little clarification on that. And don't debate, just try to give me the answer.
Thank you, through you. The intent of the data is for my confidence level in making a decision like this. I don't have any confidence because I'm based on what I've heard through word of mouth, rumors, or from what I've read in the letter. So I'm looking for extra data. Maybe if it's coming from the data set that we have from the HIFA system, that's fine. I just wanted to get that extra sense of confidence to make a decision like this.
Yes, I'll let you speak as a seconder to help answer that, Councillor Trosau.
Yes, it's to help inform the decision that's in front of us. We're sort of going around in a circle because the letter started with the recitation of certain data, and I think what this amendment is asking for is for this to be verified. And if you want to add the word existing before data, that would make it clear that we're not asking for new research to be conducted. But it seems to me that before making any type of decision, why would we not want to do our best to get underlying data to inform that decision? I'm not sure why this week is yeah.
That's more debate. That's not answering the question.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry.
I think you gave the context. So
anyway, it's to inform the decision.
So that's, I hope that gives some information, Mr. Dickens, to help you inform. Councillor Pelosa, it was you who initiated that, so I'll go back to you.
Thank you. So having heard the comment from the mover and the seconder, they're looking for that data now to be able to make the decision that's on the floor now, which would either mean it needs to be referral or Part D is absolutely not relevant to tonight's decision.
Yes, Councillor Frank, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to support this because I enjoy making evidence-based decision-making processes. So I know we don't have the data now. I'm happy to still support this because I think we're going to be making more and more decisions like this as we move forward. I do believe, in general, aggregate data is confidential, and I personally would love to see a report of this with pie charts or bar charts because that's how I best process information. So given that we have all this data points in HIFIS, I've worked with databases before. I imagine there's some way to pull data and pull it into chart form. I think that this, to the mover and seconder's point, help us make better decisions. So we, again, have all agreed that we've been hearing anecdotal rumors about how people become homeless, why they're homeless, how long they've been homeless for, where they've come from. And right now I have really nothing to refute some of the rumors other than me saying, well, I don't know, I don't have that in front of me. I don't have a report saying yes or no that you're correct. The first time, again, I've seen any numbers was in the letter with that 319 number, and that's the first time I've seen a specific number. So I'd rather have data points moving forward that I can pull from and speak to the community and that help bolster whatever narrative or whatever opinions and motions we're making. So for example, how I'd use the data is if we found that 90% of people experiencing homelessness in London were previously on ODSP or OW, and their rent went up, and then they got kicked out of their house and got evicted, then I know most of our effort and our budget should be spent on rent supplements and lobbying the provincial government to increase social assistance rates. So right now, I think for most of the decisions we've been making, we've been doing it with the best intentions and what we've heard anecdotally from the community, but I would prefer to make it with evidence where possible, and it sounds like we do have a allocation of data. It is self-reported, but that is literally any survey that is done with humans is self-reported. So I'm okay with that being maybe the reliability of that. The other thing I'd like to point out is Lifespin did say that we didn't have a complete understanding of the homelessness landscape, so I appreciate that we're kind of echoing that sentiment. And not to make more work for staff right now, again, if we can pull what we have through HIFIS, that sounds great. I would say moving forward, I would like to have a question, maybe either on the intake form or on the hub's intake form as we start to set up those. And I know we have a research committee or group that is starting to coincide with the hub model. But one of the questions being what best describes the reason why you've become unhoused, and having check boxes, and then they could pick what best describes as opposed to having long qualitative answers. I'd rather start getting some quantitative data points as we've been talking about, and maybe having 20 check boxes for different reasons, and they go through and figure out what best, or staff could try to assign it. But I'm wondering if that could be included maybe in the hub's intake form. And I'm not gonna make a motion to try and make that now, but I'm just saying that data point in the future would help me, again, make better decisions at council. And that is why I'm happy to support this, because I think moving forward, we need these data points to make future decisions, so.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll be supporting this motion. I think it's important that we get some kind of data, not only as we speak to the community and educate the community on the homeless situation in London, but it will definitely help me as an AMO board member as we are asking AMO to advocate to have some kind of data. Even incomplete data is better than no data. And I do think at the moment we really have a couple numbers in front of us. I think we need more data. I don't need to have it right now to make a decision, but to know that it is coming will help us inform not only the community, like Councillor Frank said, but also help me advocate on the AMO board.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Well, if I can just say ditto to what Councillor Hopkins said, I think in terms of the advocacy efforts moving forward, that more data, ongoing data, I mean, obviously this was, I referenced a snapshot in time. We've had a couple months since then, so updated data, you know, the most recent data is always helpful to have, because I do think that, you know, I don't want to delay moving forward with advocacy on this, but as we can continue to move forward, we should have the best information available at the time. I will echo even what Councillor Hopkins sort of alluded to with incomplete data. I think the data will always be incomplete. And Councillor Frank referenced it as well. In human participation surveys, the data will always be incomplete. But I think when we get, if everybody is able to absorb more recent data moving forward at a future date, it also may help us identify where there are gaps in the data, to Councillor Frank's points, where we may have some suggestions to offer staff in terms of how we can better improve data collection in a way that still respects people's privacy, which has to be paramount. And perhaps there may be matters that get reported to us in camera as well with regard to some of these data collection issues. I recognize that. I also appreciate that the mover and seconder didn't put a deadline on this for staff, because I think it is important to recognize they have a lot of priority issues they're working on, and this doesn't need to be next week for me. This is more of an iterative, ongoing process, and I think that as we even heard Mr. Dickens indicate, the Systems Foundation table is now started. And I just, through you, Chair, want to ask if Mr. Dickens would need further direction to, I mean, this is to provide to the appropriate standing committee, but so that the standing committee is getting good reports back through the accountability table and through the Systems Foundation table. Would these reports that would come forward to a future standing committee also be shared with the Systems Foundation table, or would you need clear direction on that?
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, through you, your worship. We can take that to the System Foundations table. That's fine. I think that table is really eyeing a fall creation of an evaluation framework for the whole of community system response. So data collection will be a big component of that, and the conversations are really focused, even in the first meeting, around what is important data to collect. And one sentiment that was shared in the meeting was what's valuable versus what's interesting. It takes a lot of time to collect data from vulnerable individuals. And when they're presenting themselves at the point of contact or at the front door looking for service, they're desperate. Having lengthy intake forms, 20 check boxes, is not conducive to providing in-the-moment supports. That may happen over time through case management models and through casework and social work. That might happen where we start to collect more information that we find very interesting, or it helps guide our future direction. But what's important, and what we heard from the community at this point, is if it's data, if we're going to collect data, we have to do something with it. So I just want to also offer that to committee as we start to sort of co-design here information we'd like to see. There are frontline workers who are required to collect that data, and the more time they spend on the administrative side of things, the less time they spend on the care and survival side of the equation.
Okay, go ahead.
Great. So I'm glad that that direction to also inform the Systems Foundation table is taken, because more so than us, I think the people at the Systems Foundation table have a great deal of experience in data management, and they, just by virtue of getting this information themselves, may identify better, different, alternate ways to collect data moving forward. I certainly understand what Mr. Dickens is saying about the frontline worker, but I would agree, and this was part of the conversation I had with Councillor Ferreira yesterday, for future policy decisions, the better the data, the clearer direction we can set for policy. So there is value to it in the longer run. I fully recognize where at the frontline intake process, that's not the most important component, but I think that there are opportunities through the process to collect more data, further steps in. And so I think that sort of flagging this now through to the Systems Foundation table so that they can help identify some opportunities there as well is a good step. So happy to support this amendment. As I indicated to Councillor Ferreira last night, I don't have an objection to collecting some more data, and this I think will get us started on that step, even though it will still be incomplete at the end of the day.
Okay, I don't have any other speakers on the amendment, which is to add the D. We did update it with the existing data piece. So if there's no other speakers, I'm going to open the amendment to add D about the data and open that for voting now.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 12-0.
Okay, so now we have the as amended twice motion, which means it's different, which means I need to confirm with the mover and the seconder that they're still willing to move the new as amended. So moved, seconded, okay. So same, Deputy Mayor Lewis, Councillor Pelosa. And Councillor Frank, you were on the speakers list for the old as amended. Do you want to be on the new? Okay. All right. So if there's no other debate, I know people want to maybe vote on this in different chunks. I think just for speed, we're just going to do them all separately. So just get ready. You're going to do A, B, C, D. There might be an it being noted attached to one of those, but we'll kind of deal with that as we go. So we're going to use the same mover and seconder for all parts. I don't see any further debate or discussion on this, so we'll start with part A. You have to read the motion on the screen in there. This is the part about the advocacy with AMO, Big City Mayors, and Government of Ontario piece. We'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 10-2.
Okay, and I'll open Part B, and I'll just remind colleagues, we've already unanimously approved Part B once when we changed it the first time as an amendment, but we'll open that for voting.
I vote yes.
Closing the vote, motion carries 12-0.
Okay, and now Part C. Councilor Rahman? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you. I just wanted to thank the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Pelosa again for the communication, but I also wanted to take a moment to thank Lifespin for the communication that they also included here. It was very thoughtful in terms of reflecting on the comments, which are not attached to the motion, but were included in the letter. And I do think that we need to, I personally know I needed to be reminded about the fact that we do have an obligation under the Constitution and under UNDRIP around free movement of people. And how that relates to this topic is very unique, sensitive, and legal in nature. And so to me, it's separate enough from the motion, but I do make note of it. And I also make note of the concern around the dehumanizing and stigmatizing rhetoric, and that we do have that responsibility to ensure that the conversation on this topic with the community stays at a place where people are not othered and that they're not made to feel as though this is someone coming from another place and this is another person's issue. This is our community. These are people that live here. These are people that need our help here. And we also need to acknowledge that and take ownership for that. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to open C, Part C, for voting.
Closing the vote, motion passes 10-2.
Okay, and then Part D plus probably the being noted, I assume will be part of that. Mr. Dickens is just going to provide, and this is the magic of having staff working in real time, just a bit of clarification on what we would be, be expecting with D so that no one has unexpected, well, people know what the expectations are. So Mr. Dickens, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, what we will do is we will undertake a homelessness at a glance report back, if you will, where we will go through what HIFAS gathers already. We will look for January to July 2023 data. So that will give you a picture of the first half of the year plus July in terms of all the information that's collected in HIFAS at this time. That's about 15 to 2,000 files in HIFAS, so it's going to take us at least until October to report back, and we'll bring that back to SPPC in October with that homelessness at a glance. So that will give council a bit of information, hopefully.
Okay, just want everybody to have clarity. So that's D. D is on the floor. It's moved and seconded. I'm going to open D for voting.
Closing the vote, motion passes 12-0.
Okay, that concludes item 4.1. Item 4.2 is consideration of an appointment to the Museum London Board of Directors. It requires one member of council. I didn't see any letters asking to be nominated on the added agenda, so I'll look to see who might be interested. Councillor Ferreira and then Councillor Frank. Oh, well, you can both nominate someone, so I'll go to Councillor Ferreira.
I'd
Go ahead,
like to
Councillor
nominate
Frank.
Councillor Chasso.
Okay. Yes, you can answer. So Councillor Trussow is interested in the museum, London Board of Directors. You're okay with that nomination? Great. Anybody else interested in kind of poke your colleague beside you? Maybe nominate them. Let's try not to nominate people who weren't here. That didn't go so well last time. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have one nominee, so maybe I'll just look for, instead of a process, I'll just look to see if the mover and seconder are willing to just put this on the floor as an appointment. Yes? Okay. So we're going to put Councillor Trosau forward as being appointed to the Museum London Board of Directors. Is there any debate on that? Councillor Ferreira?
Thank you, through you. I just wanted to possibly go to Councillor Trosso to see if he's okay with that nomination.
I did ask him, and he nodded and said yes.
I should say on the record, yes, I would enjoy doing that and feel I'm prepared to do it.
There you go. So I'm going to open that appointment of Councillor Trosau to this board for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 11-0.
Great job, very efficient. 4.3 is a confirmation of appointment to the Old East Village Business Improvement Area. You'll see there is a resignation and then a request to appoint a replacement, both from Libro Credit Union. That's all that we have before us on that. I'll look to see if someone's willing to move that appointment. Deputy Mayor Lewis, and is seconded by Councillor Frank. Any discussion? No? Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 11-0.
Okay, 4.4 is confirmation of appointment to the Hamilton Road BIA. There's a letter from them as well. You'll see that there's a list of suggested appointments. I'll look for anybody who's willing to move a motion to appoint those individuals or something alternate. Yeah, to support okay, Deputy Mayor Lewis and Councillor Cuddy are willing to support the letter as drafted by the Executive Director of the BIA. Any discussion on that? Okay, then we'll open the vote on the appointment of those board members.
Closing the vote, motion carries 11-0.
Okay, there are no deferred matters or other business. There is a confidential item, and colleagues, I'll ask for your indulgence. I was supposed to remind Councillor Pribble that he had a question related generally to 4.1 and that he should have added a reason to go into camera related to that. So I'm going to allow him to make a motion to add a reason to go in camera related to generally the health and homelessness whole of community response system. And if we have a seconder, we can add that and we can go into camera for both the reason on the agenda as well as the additional one. And I'll have the clerk read out what the actual reason is, but I'm going to let you move a motion to just go into camera. To
So
add
fellow
the reason.
colleagues, I would like to add a motion to go in camera. Point 4.1, and it has to do with an legal advice in terms of the future operations of the hubs.
So okay, so this motion is to actually to add a reason to go into camera. So I'll get the, I'll read out the exact wording in a second, but is someone willing to second that? Okay, the Deputy Mayor Lewis will second. So it's that the following closed session be added to item 6. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege as it relates to the health and homelessness whole of community system response and the future operation of hubs. That's the reason. So we're voting on adding that reason. We're not voting to go into camera yet. We're just voting to add that and give authorization for that as a reason to go into camera. So we'll open that for voting.
Counselor Trosso? Closing the vote, motion carries 10-0.
Okay, I need a motion now to actually go in camera. Moved by Councillor Cuddy, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion? Okay, we'll open that in the system for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 10-0.
Okay, we'll just be a few minutes as we transition in camera. Now, the order I'm going to do these is the one that was originally on the agenda, which means there's going to be a bunch of people who leave. But I need, for the second part, the acting city manager, Mr. Dickens, Mr. Card, not to go too far because you'll be here for the one related to health and homelessness. And I don't know if Mr. Parody, no, probably not. I'll let you guys, we'll figure that out, but just don't go too far on that for the health and homelessness folks. Okay, we're back in public session, colleagues. I'm going to look to Councillor Rahman to report out on our in-camera session.
Thank you, and through you, progress was made on the 2 matters of which we went in camera.
Thank you, Councillor. That brings us to the final item on our agenda, which is adjournment. I'd look for a motion to adjourn from Councillor Ferreira, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. All those in favor of adjournment? Any opposed?
Motion carries.
Thank you, colleagues. We're adjourned.